There is a whole bunch of new industry happening, and it's all focused around electric vehicles, the introduction of low emissions, reducing the carbon footprint, etc., right throughout the Western world in particular. Having said that, China is rapidly catching up and passing a number of the Western countries that you would think should be right up with it. A lot of the new technology in Europe is focused around what we call Euro 6. Euro 6 is a mandatory legislation which happened, what are we today, the 15th? It happened 15 days ago, 1st of July, and everything I'm going to show you, whilst we presented this much earlier this year, is now actually in place. So, and because we no longer make cars in Australia, ambiguous statement, but you know the background, the car park in Australia is rapidly moving away from homegrown product, as you know. I think we're down to less than 10% now of the marketplace. We've now got huge amount of imports, of course, and those imports primarily are coming out of Europe and Asia. What I'm showing you now is what is actually on the streets in Adelaide in that particular showroom over the road, and the industry has a wake-up call. I presented this particular presentation over 5 hours to the TAFE lecturers of Australia. They all came together here in Adelaide, and it was quite exciting to see these guys at last understand that the change is there, we have to embrace it. So there's a lot of regulation and implementation happening, and it's all about reductions in exhaust emissions, improvements in the fuel economy, increases in passenger comfort and convenience. You say, what's that got to do with batteries? Have a look at this. And improvements in occupant and pedestrian vehicle safety. Regulations globally are now leading to the introduction of new ecosystems, and in particular into the areas of the battery technology that we know today. So if you're driving a hybrid car now, you're going to be one of many, many millions in this world driving hybrid cars. In Europe, by the end of this calendar year, 2015, there is 35 million hybrid cars on the road, of which this new legislation and this technology now applies. There's a whole bunch of things that have to be done in the car as well, other than just battery. The first one is tyre pressure monitoring systems, mandatory. 15 days ago, you cannot buy a car in Europe unless it's got TPMS. Now, that's a bit of a novelty in Australia, sold a lot through as aftermarket installs, through the RV industry, etc., etc. As you probably know, if you drive an electric car like my vehicle, rolling resistance is key to part of the performance. I've just put new tyres on that car. It was a real problem to get the correct sized tyres with the right compounds in Australia. However, we managed the process. So tyre pressure monitoring is now mandatory, and it cannot be creature switched off. It has to remain on. Low rolling resistance tyres is another facet of the changes. And gear shift indicator. Has anyone got a Golf or a Polo or Audi or BM or Merc that's got gear shift indicator on it? Okay. 530's got it. 530, yeah. Look, it's not applicable for automatic cars, of course. It's being Europe, being manual, as particularly United Kingdom. 71% of the cars registered are manuals and small diesels. This device tells you when you change gear. So that's part of the emission management for the country. In automatics, of course, it happens and you can't control it, it'll do it correctly. So those are just 3 areas of change that are nothing to do with batteries. So now we start talking about batteries and vehicle electronics. Micro-hybrid and mild hybrids is the language, guys. Regulation and new automotive technologies. It's all about the car makers meeting the global standards. So we now have idle stop start. Who in the room is driving an ISS car other than the Prius? Anyone? Oh, okay, well that's interesting. If I stand up here in a year's time, half this audience will be saying, yeah, I've got an ISS. Idle stop start is the entry level as micro-hybrid. It's known as a micro-hybrid 1. There's 5 versions of hybrids. Lance is not here. Lance from Victor with the Outlander? No, we're going to talk a bit about his car. ISS, the second level is ISS and kinetic energy. You've heard of kinetic energy recovery, KERS, that's part of the Formula 1 language from last year. It was mandatory. Guess what? It's now, 15 days ago, it's now part of your new car that you buy in Europe and very shortly Asia as well. So KERS has gone from racetrack to reality to consumer commodity. The next level, level 3, is ISS, kinetic energy recovery and starter generator. No longer do we have starter motors, we no longer have alternators, we have a chunk of flywheel that does all that work for you, so we eliminate belt drives and eliminate extra electric machines around the engine. That's known as a Micro 3. Then the mild hybrid is ISS, idle stop start, kinetic energy recovery and starter generator engine assist. So now we get the situation where the electric motor can actually assist the petrol or the diesel engine, and known as a mild hybrid. This is still not Prius, this is new technology. ISS, kinetic energy recovery and starter generator full electric drive, known as a full hybrid. So this is where the Outlander now fits into the package. As you probably may not be familiar, the ICE, internal combustion engine Outlander, is just a generator. It just drives a generator. The generator charges the batteries run the vehicle, and at various voltages. If you drive a Lexus four-wheel drive SUV, the rear diff is 680 volts and the front axle is 415. So there's a whole lot of technology in running those cars. They're full hybrids. And of course Prius is a full hybrid of a different older technology, but certainly still very effective. So all of these requirements has come about because of government emissions and economy regulations, and it was a lot of fun for a guy like me from down under to be able to present this sort of stuff to Europeans who think that they know all about it all anyway. ISS, I'm going to just run through some of how all this works. If this is too boring for you or you're not interested, but just tell me and I can change. Essentially the ISS function is, obviously I chose BMW because of Europe. When you pull up at a traffic light or whatever, the engine stops. There's a whole chunk of technology to tell where the pistons where to stop and what's charge cycle. You put your foot on the accelerator pedal because you want to move away, down goes your foot and the engine automatically starts and off you go again. And you'll notice that the battery for this particular vehicle is located in the trunk or the boot or under the back seat, because that's another part of the new legislation, that it can't be on the front of the car and alongside the power plant. So that's an idle stop start. The entry level, so many cars have got ISS. Up until now, it was possible for creatures, humans, to turn that off. That is no longer available. You cannot hack into the computer on the car to turn it off. It is mandatory. I know the dealer over the road has called me in a couple of times to say, you know, this person's got a problem with their battery life, and when I investigate I find that that car is running 60% of its time without ISS engaged. And of course then there's an issue. So the KERS system is next. The alternator is activated only when the accelerator is released or the brake pedal. So this is regen. So it is mandatory, therefore, 15 days ago, that all European cars shall, and now the Asians, shall be built with regen. This is part globally of emission management. So the kinetic energy that would normally be lost by heat is now converted into electricity, and Sally and myself and anyone else got a leaf here at all? No. As we know, you can generate an enormous amount of travel distance if you use regen correctly. It's quite surprising. When the accelerator pedal is depressed, the alternator is deactivated, which ensures the full power of the engine can be directed to the wheels. Remember, we're talking about hybrid cars here, not battery electric cars. We're talking about hybrids. And the KERS system monitors the level of the battery charge, and if necessary continues to charge the battery even during acceleration if the battery is that discharged. So the system is very smart and quite intelligent. Have a look at what happens on this. This is KERS now. There's the regular battery in the back, and you'll notice very shortly we're having a look at that battery, and you'll notice it has an optimum level. The AGM, the auxiliary battery that runs on a hybrid car, like that battery over there, that's actually a Prius one, is designed to run at 82% state of charge. In everyone else's car in the room tonight, if your calcium battery drops to 82%, it will last less than a year. So entirely different chemistry, entirely different grids, and I've got a couple of examples of grids that we can pass around. So with the KERS system, when we're now travelling and accelerating, we actually can recover that energy and in fact recharge the battery back up, right up to full capacity if required. There it is. This is MicroHybrid 3. This particular illustration shows the stator here and the rotor, and that fits between the internal combustion engine and the transmission. That's a typical setup that's now replaced alternators and starter motors. No more flywheel ring gears, etc. I'm going to whip through some of this, but I just want to show you how the Hybrid 3 actually works. When we start off the car, we've got a number of phases. Phase 1 is what we call the starter mode, and the engine is cranked. And here you can see the energy going from the AGM battery, same as that Prius one there, up to the starter generator. So far it's very similar to Prius. Phase 2, we're in charge mode. Now the internal combustion engine is operating, and it can then operate the starter generator, and we can then recharge the battery as required. That's pretty much what the Prius one starts and stops at. Now we start to look at phase 3, and the throttle is now released and the engine braking takes effect. So now you can see the engine braking coming back in through the regeneration line here to recharge the AGM battery. So the battery is getting discharged constantly, recharged partially, discharged constantly. It's all about what we call depth of discharge and charge acceptance, which is the recovery. So let's look at what happens in passive boost. This is a mild hybrid car. We're now introducing, this is the typical hybrid car. We've got a high voltage pack at the back, and we're running the starter generator between the ICE and the gearbox or the transmission, if the car has a transmission. Cars like ours, of course, that is Sally's and mine, have only got a forward reversing gear. You don't need a transmission in that car. Passive boost it's in addition to operating the start, stop and brake regen, it acts as a launch from standstill to deliver more energy to the launch of the vehicle away from the traffic lights. Wide open throttle, WOT, is for overtaking, particularly if you're dragging a load. And this feature enables the vehicle manufacturers to reduce engine capacity. A big motor now in the entry-level cars is 1.1 litres. Less than a litre is common 3-cylinder diesels with twin turbos and exotic things to give them the horsepower, and they're then backed up with passive boost. So the electric system acts as additional kilowatt capacities. So you can lower the engine capacities and increase fuel economies as a consequence. The AGM battery, however, is only used to power the house. It only powers the house of the vehicle. It does not drive the wheels. So the AGM battery, like the conventional lead acid construction of this type here, has nothing to do with driving the car. It looks after the house management of the car and the creature stuff. So in passive boost again, what happens? Let's have a quick look. Here's the AGM battery down here. We have a DC to DC converter that you're familiar with, and a high voltage battery. So now we integrate between the whole lot of these in the following way. Phase 1 is the starter mode as before, and the engine is cranking. Here comes the energy through the DC to DC up to the starter generator. Notice now that the battery has been discharged. Phase 2 is in charge mode. The engine is cranking, so the flywheel is running, which happens to be the rotor, and that's now generating energy back into the high voltage battery. We then convert that back down again, step it back down, and run at 14.4 volts for the AGM battery. So the battery is now under charge. Red discharge, and green for battery charge. Phase 3 function, the throttle is released and in comes brake regeneration over here, and we get engine braking and the battery gets another charge. And although we don't show it, it actually goes through back into the auxiliary battery again. And phase 4, this is passive boost. Phase 4, the throttle is applied, you want to pass something, the engine assistance is then delivered and the battery is then discharged again. So we've now got a discharge, a recharge, a partial charge and a full discharge again. So the battery this is the auxiliary battery, is starting to have to work entirely differently to a standard calcium battery in your Holden, Falcon, whatever you might be driving here tonight. In full hybrid, this is where it gets really exciting. We have to now add in a clutch. So we actually have a clutch between the engine and the transmission system, so that we actually can disengage the internal combustion engine, which would sit down here entirely, and now we have a pure electric vehicle. In full hybrid, this gets a little complex, but you can see there's the clutch sitting in here. We'll press the button in phase 1 because we've got a number of, there's the phase 1 coming up. We then go into charge mode, so because the engine is turning, so the starter generator generates energy, comes back and tops up the AGM battery. Phase 3 is throttle release, so we take our foot off the throttle, we generate energy in the form of brake regeneration. Here it comes down, across, and jumps the gap as well. Phase 4 is the throttle is applied in normal conditions, the engine motor assistance happens and the battery is discharged. And here comes the killer one, phase 5, slow short journey, the engine is switched off entirely and the battery is discharged. So now your conventional calcium battery in the car you drove here tonight, it can be absolutely punished in these situations. Discharge, recharge, partial recharge, full discharge, full discharge. So the AGM battery, or it could be enhanced flooded battery, that battery is now having to work like never before. So we've had to do a whole chunk of chemistry and metallurgical changes. And I brought some of that stuff along tonight to show you. So the battery demands and technology comparison is really very substantial. What type of new eco solutions, what type of battery requirement will we need? Well, the industry has decided to change from amp hour capacities, which we know all about in the electric vehicle fraternity, and we're switching across to kilowatt hours. Amp hour capacities don't mean anything anymore. It's particularly in hybrids, it's all about kilowatt hours. So you can see a conventional internal combustion engine, normally of around about a 60 amp hour in the old language, would be equivalent to a 0.3 kilowatt hour capacity battery. MicroHybrid stage 1, 0.5. Stage 2 with KERS, 0.7. So you can see how very quickly the kilowatt hour capacities of the batteries are ramping up. At this point here with the 1.5, the industry's switching out of lead acid and going to lithium iron phosphates. In our laboratory I've been doing some 24 volt work for Audi and 48 volt work for Audi for determining potential battery life. And they're lithium iron phosphates. And they're quite large, heavy batteries. It's quite surprising because they're quite substantial. And then of course we get to the electric vehicle, plug-in electric motor only. We're familiar with AGMEFB 16 kilowatt hours and goes up to 24. And if you can afford a big Tesla, well then you could be in the 80, 90 kilowatt hour capacities at a price. So there's a whole chunk of new development happened in the last, and I guess that's why I've been travelling so much internationally in the last 18 months. The whole battery industry, as we know it today, has been turned on its ear. And we now have these new exotic batteries specifically designed around electric vehicle propulsion and hybrid applications. Now this is a little bit of fun. I enjoy developing and putting this one on the screen. What I'm going to try and show you, because you're a little bit techo and you understand things like state of health and state of charge, we're going to now look at what happens to the battery in your car. So the first phase is acceleration, where the alternator or the starter generator is disengaged, it's not charging. So this is what we're going to do to your battery. This is a conventional, the dashed line is the conventional calcium battery that I probably spoke about in this room about a year ago or whatever. But the other line, this line here, is what we're doing to your AGM or your EFB battery that sits as the auxiliary battery in your hybrid car. So as we accelerate and we get to constant speed, you can see the voltage doesn't do a heck of a lot. You can see the battery charge and discharge and current, the amperage of course will climb because the alternator or the generator may be running or maybe it's not. But the state of charge, this is my specialty I suppose, the chemistry has now started to deteriorate. So in that first accelerating and constant speed when you're running down the highway, look what you're doing to your battery. It has moved from 100% state of charge, which a calcium battery has to live at. It has to be at 100% to perform. With the AGMs and the EFBs, it actually starts to deteriorate. So the next thing we do is we decelerate, and here up the top, the alternator has engaged brake regeneration. And so now we get a real spike in voltage, which we normally don't see. We get a huge spike, and that could be up to 15.8 volts up here. And obviously travelling with that will be current, so we get an amperage spike. Look how vertical it is, it doesn't get time. And up comes the state of charge. So this is what the power of regeneration. By the way, this regeneration here, that change between gradual increase to substantial increase, that could be 30 amps, this could be 120 amps. That happens in 20 milliseconds. A conventional battery cannot handle that. It'll just push back, and when we push back, what do we generate? Heat, resistance and heat, and the battery cooks itself. So these batteries are designed to handle that in 20 milliseconds. At vehicle stopping, we're now stationary. The ISS is engaged. Idle stop start's engaged. So all the consumers, that's the house and you and what you want to do. You want your air conditioning on, you want your sound system, you want your bum warmers, you want the rear view mirrors to be heated and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to touch anything. The car will manage that. But look what it does to my poor old battery. Over here. It drops down the voltage. It stabilises at a discharge level because it's got constant current on it. Look at the chemistry, it's just disappeared. So we started off up here, and look where we finished that part of it. When we go to engine start, the initial discharge from the alternator has happened, so the voltage will slowly climb, up comes some amperage, but the state of charge being chemistry takes a long time to recover. So essentially, we then move on back to the constant speed cycle again, and here we go, we've recovered some of the voltage, nowhere near what your conventional old-fashioned car, that's the one sitting out here that you bought yesterday in the car lot, does to its battery. And you can see what happens to the current, and we're starting almost to flatline the state of charge. Folks, I want you to look at where we started with state of charge and where we finish at state of charge. What's happening? That battery is being pushed to the limit. And lastly, the deceleration and fuel cut-off, at last the battery gets some recovery. If it gets back to this condition, it's a miracle. This line here is around 80%. If you are a calcium battery, it has to work, here it is down here, it has to work at 98% state of charge. Otherwise, chemically, it will fail. So what we're doing to the auxiliary battery, the AGM battery in a hybrid car, is punishing. However, the design that we've now come up, we say we, that's the industry, has come up with, is a design that can give around 3 to 4 years life under full hybrid operation. So no longer are you going to see 7-year life for a new calcium battery in a new car. You'll only expect to see 3 to 4 years. If you're in aggressive stop-start driving, like a lot of Adelaide is, unfortunately, you're going to see that deterioration down here of the state of charge. That number will start to drop down below that line and will start ending up down at the bottom down here. And sulfation will be the result, be it AGM or be it enhanced flutter. So what's the industry done about all this? Well, I guess what we've had to do is come up with completely new technologies. And by the way, I work with UASA from Europe, GS in Japan. They're the great battery technologists in the world. Great companies to do work with. Their R&D guys are phenomenal. Here's the facts. Production of vehicles featuring these new technologies will improve fuel economy, will increase 70 to 80% of all vehicles produced by 2015. In fact, that number, after I made the slide, is wrong. It's now 35 million. That was up to the end of June. It's now 35 million cars have got all of this functionality happening. And of course, we're starting to see them in the Australian car park. Hence, I had to do that work with the TAFE lecturers to get them up to speed because they didn't understand how to train our techs. So high volume vehicles from 2008 and 9 on have gradually been introducing this technology. That's where the Prius has had a great foothold in that area there over many years, and absorbed glass mat. Now that particular battery there, sorry? The particular battery there is out of Prius. Sorry, that's a replacement battery for Prius. In fact, Eric's got one running in his car 2 years, I think it's been. And then where's Eric? Lost him. There's a couple of years now. As one of the experimental ones from the lab that I asked him to run some data. We tracked a whole chunk of data on it, and I found out some very interesting things about Prius charging. That is a 45 amp hour in the old language. The standard one in Prius of those models was only 35. But we could already see deterioration, so the aftermarket industry went straight to 45. That is entirely different chemistry to any other AGMs that you might be able to buy at super cheap in those sorts of places. And the other alternate is enhanced flooded battery. So there's 2 levels of batteries now being developed to suit microhybrids and hybrid cars, and eventually, of course, in full electric cars, we also have one of these batteries to run the house. And that's law, it is mandatory. Your ABS, your SRS, creature stuff and safety has to be run outside of the high voltage battery pack. So that same technology has found its way back into EVs. So very quickly, AGM, because I think we've probably been through a bit of this in some other presentations. Because this was Europe, I would change the car, of course, for Asian presentations. But the high end or the middle upper cars in Europe run AGM. That's obviously a BM. And the entry cars run the flooded version. So the Polos and the little Skodas and the micro cars tend to run the flooded version. And the difference is about 40% in cost price to manufacture the battery. So it's quite significant. In some Golfs, Volkswagen Audi group experimented by running some vehicles on petrol cars, on EFB, and diesel cars on AGM. The failures were the petrol EFBs were in Europe lucky to get through 12 months. And of course that means it hits the car maker's warranty. They don't like it. They want them to see 12 months on one day, then it's your problem, not theirs. So they've just now made the financial decision to bear the cost and run AGM. In Australia, guess what? Yeah, we get the leftovers. So you don't know what is going to be in the Golf until you dig it out from underneath the golf clubs in the back of the car. But they're all about idle, stop, start, alternator switch off and passive boost capabilities. AGM has a significant factor between the 2 grids. Steve, would you mind just grabbing those two grids there and hold them up, so just underneath that chart? Yep, that's it. You'll see one is bronzy coloured. That's the positive grid. That's an AGM positive with scrim paper attached, and the other one is the negative grid. Between those two goes that chunk of foam, and the acid H2SO4 is impregnated into that foam, and then the surplus is taken out, it's vacuumed out, and the battery is weighed to be sure that it's correct to the correct weight of acid in the battery, and then out it goes in the field. So these batteries can sit on their side, or you can even do it upside down if you're brave enough. It absorbed the electrolyte and keeping it very close under pressure to the grids. I'll just flick through some of this. And there's no reservoir, there's no splash, and that meets the Euro requirement for rear end collision, because the now stated condition is that the battery can no longer be in the front of the car. It's got to be under the floor in the passenger compartment, under the back seat, in its own battery cell, or in the boot or the trunk underneath where the spare tyre used to be, because we don't have spare tyres anymore. The increased number of plates and thinner, you can pass those around, Steve, if you don't mind. You see how thin the plate is, and therefore the plate is kept under compression to ensure it doesn't buckle or bend under the loads and the temperatures that are involved. And to be quite frank, you can see my two arrows there. On the production line, a colleague of mine, we just came back from Korea, and we actually watched the machine push the grids together and slide them into the cavities. And I pulled him off, and got one off, and I said to my colleague Philip, I said, you squeeze it together and pop it in. And he's a big, burly, he couldn't do it, because it's actually tons of force required to push the grids in. This is quite fascinating, and that's where it gets its energy. 30 to 40% increase in cold clinking capacity. And this is interesting, designed in ISS applications to deliver 360,000 starts. Your battery in your car today, out there in the car park, 205,000 is the best it's rated at. Improved operation in low state of charge, as you saw, and improved ability to accept charge immediately after start from regen. So if the car is cold, it doesn't make any difference to this chemistry. This chemistry has to accept in 20 milliseconds from, say, 0 amps in the case of BMW on the big car, 210 amps in 20 seconds, without failure, without any resistance issues. It's quite phenomenal. They're valve regulated. They have those plates are still calcium metallurgy, and there's a little valve in each cell that regulates the pressure inside the cell to about 2 psi. And this is what happens, why we have it. As the battery is being used, the hydrogen is exuded from the H2SO4. The molecules are then recombined, forms deionised water, drops back in again and recombines with the H2SO4. So it's called a recombination process. So each cell has got a chemical recombination process happening inside, as well as a electrochemical reaction with the grids and the ionic displacement. And the lid, we put a labyrinth in the lid to make sure that we cool it down and capture those molecules and put them back in the box. And we have a flame arrestor and a pressure relief valve. So let's have a quick look then at the EFB. You'll see quite a few of these out there. In fact, Lance spoke to me about his battery in his Outlander. He wanted to know where to get a replacement one from, and I said RAA, because I've actually done the chemistry on it. We've approved it, and it's now in place in the RAA's range, EFB. But EFB is primarily used in low-end cars. You know, this little Fiat Punto, I think that one is. The little Skodas and the little Group 1 Audis and so on. I think over industry changes in the next 12-14 months, you'll see them all swing across to AGM. So EFBs are more cost effective, looks the same as any other battery. That's a European design there. It does have cyclic durability, cyclic operation, has massive charge acceptance, numbers like 340%. I did some last week that were flown in from Korea for testing, and 340% charge acceptance is just norm now. whereas the calcium batteries in your cars are lucky if they get 100%. And the car makers demand 100%, the battery makers struggle to deliver 95%, whereas in this new industry now, it's multiples above that. It's really quite exciting. And starting capacity of an EFB is 270. So we go from 360,000 cycles to 270,000 to around 200,000 in the older style, which was only 18 months old anyway. Expanded grids is what you've got there that we've been passing around. High density positive plate active material, it's a bit heavy, some of this stuff, but plate structure increases the number of plates per cell, so we no longer have 13 plates. There's up around the 17s, 19s, 21 plates. In the large BMW one, it's 27 plates per cell, quite substantial. Increased cranking speeds, reduced cranking time, reduced carbon emissions. So there's a whole bunch of benefits, very similar. It's a bit too busy to worry about reading it all tonight. So I just want to close on how do you care for these new technology batteries? Because of the design, the battery can be completely recharged in around 3 hours. With a conventional calcium, it's 36 to 72 hours. With these ones, 3 hours. Because of the compression, because of the metallurgy, because of the chemistry, and because it's designed to accept 200 amps or 180 amps in 20 milliseconds and a charge acceptance factor of 300%. So it's new charging regimes. I've just done a whole, which I'll show you in a minute, whole chunk of work with Red Arc on redesigning chargers. The battery recharge must be carried out with care. Constant current charger, read the Arlec $30 ones from Target, won't do the job. In fact, it'll cook up both the battery and the charger. And that's typical of some of the smarter chargers made here in South Australia. Of course, that's the bench charger, that's the BC-DC that lives in the car and charges an auxiliary battery as you're going along. Dangers. Incorrect application, taking out an EFB and putting an AGM in is fraught with danger. Taking out an AGM because of cost, and the AGM battery is usually around $220, $240, and you say, no, that's too dear, I want to put an $80 battery in. Yep, buyers beware. Insurance company will say, good, got out of that claim, because the car will burn. The battery will burn. It'll dry it out in 16 days and cook. So if any of your friends have got it, don't let them play around with that chemistry. That's the presentation tonight. I'm sorry it was very rushed. That normally takes up to 4 hours because I have a whole chunk of other stuff on what's happening with the chemical formulas and the reactions inside the box. Questions?
How do these batteries compare to the, say, lithium batteries that I've got in the fully electric car?
That's entirely different. This is still based, these are still based around lead acids and calciums. They are not lithiums. However, one of the slides which I flicked through, in the negative plate, that's the black one that's passed around, that has quite a content of lithium in it. And that acts as what we call an expander. It opens up the microscopic structure of the crystals and allows ions, IONS, to impregnate in, so you get a quicker charge acceptance. So that's what the black one is.
That's what I'm trying to get at, is how good are these compared to these, say, the ones that I've purchased, the 100 amp?
Oh, nothing like it at all. That's a traction battery. This is a cycling battery.
Right.
No, the traction batteries are entirely different chemistry again. We call it motive power, actually. Question?
You mentioned often the calcium battery, the calcium chemistry.
Yes.
In the same breath as the lead acids battery.
Yes.
What are we talking about?
Oh, yeah. Calcium is less than 3% of the grid metallurgy. There's 22 elements, metals, that make up the grid. Arsenic, selenium, tin, silver, gold, all sorts, now lithiums. When we say calcium, it's a design of battery with known electrochemical characteristics. And that was introduced in around about 2006 in Australia, and in the rest of the world it was about 2002. So calcium batteries is what's out there today. So it's only referring to about 3% in the lead acid content of the grid metallurgy.
It's a lead acid battery.
Oh yes, that's a lead acid battery, yeah. Yeah, but we use the chemical term calcium to identify that it's not antimony. An antimonial battery is the old cycle. Antimonial batteries are still huge production in storage and motive power again. Yeah, fork trucks, handmade, used to be handmade, 2-volt cells, stand about that tall, square. Yeah, 300, 400, 800 amp cell, 800 amp hour cell. Yeah. Any other questions?
In a fully electric car, where you have the auxiliary battery, which is normally 12 volt, now if you are not running DC to DC but using a charger which charges your lead acid battery at the same time as the lithium batteries, then you're deep cycling your...
Okay, the auxiliary battery in a pure electric car is never charged from external sources. It's only charged from the high voltage battery pack through the DC-DC converter. Yeah, and that's a safety thing.
Oh, okay, because I've been charging mine with I've got 2 chargers, one doing 12.
Sure.
And and interestingly, the batteries have been lasting for over 4 years.
I misled everybody. There's 2 worlds, isn't there? There's the converted world, which is like you, and then there's the production OE battery electric cars.
Batteries don't treat me differently from original manufacturers. They in fact they're probably meaner to me. But my question was going to be, should I be therefore using, if I'm going to do it that way, I should be probably using a lithium 12 volt or 13.8 or whatever it is volt auxiliary battery, because that's designed to cycle much more deeply.
You could do that, yes. No car maker has done it because of simply cost. That's all.
I've done it. It does.
It works.
I haven't tested it. But
it'll work very well.
Yeah.
They're complementary chemistries.
Buy deep cycle 12 volt lead acid batteries.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a semi-cycler in Prius. All the rest of the cars run deep cycles. So, because semi-cycler in Prius has got a different duty cycle. By the way, that's a Prius battery. That's a giveaway. It's brand new. It's been through the lab. Needs a recharge. If anyone's got a Prius or wants that battery, please take it tonight, because I don't like carrying batteries around. I carry dump 20 or 30 a month, and that's just another one gone. Okay, question.
Just going to ask a sort of question. Caravan batteries, which have typically been AGM for the last 10 or 15 years, is the AGM any different really to?
Yes, entirely different. There's two chemistries. There's AGM cycling, which is caravans, RVs, designed as a deep cycle battery, as Eric raised, and then there's AGM ISS. This is AGM ISS.
So ISS will be the
ISS is
compared to the old.
Yeah. It will supplant any RV applications over time. However, the RV industry is switching so quickly across to lithium iron phosphate that probably the ISS won't get a Guernsey. Yeah. In fact, just as a point on that, I'm doing work with Red Arc to develop charging systems for recreational vehicles, GELCOs and what have you, because they've been so agriculture and so primitive. And as that industry is switching to lithium iron phosphates, they've left the charging regime well behind. So we're now in catch-up mode to make sure we can do it. Nick?
Yeah, along those lines, my understanding that is, if you need deep cycle, you need thicker plates.
Yes, much thicker.
That extra surface area with your thin plates and the ability to charge your plate.
A deep cycle battery is designed to go down to, say, 10%, 1,250 times without causing damage. A starting battery that's in our cars in the car park that you bought yesterday or before the 1st of July, that's designed to be discharged 30 times. So your killer calcium battery will fast if you put it into a cycling application. So the deep cycle battery has thicker grids, different metallurgy, high levels of tin, no calcium, high levels of antimony, high levels of selenium and arsenic, all designed to do different things. But the key is it has different active, what we call active material, and the positives and the negatives. And the negative grid has a big dose of carbon, call it carbon black if you like, call it red lead if you like, added into the chemistry to enable it to absorb that charge without heat. So quite a different chunk of chemistry in those.
The glass flat batteries that they use in a floating situation, like in a telephone exchange or something.
Yep.
Are they a different?
They're entirely different again. That's very similar to what I just described. They are a cycling battery, deep cycling as well. They can go way down, 2 and 3% and then come recover again. But their life is about 25 to 30 years. And they're very, very exotic. Yeah, live in glass cases. A lot of them. They do, literally. Yeah.
You're talking about the glass one, but what about the plastic ones?
They're same technology, just a different box.
So keeping it very simple, because I'm not into the battery scene, that battery, the new technology that you're talking about, that's just a very good short-term storage of energy that you quickly can charge up.
You can dump it out and you can pull it back in again.
While the old technology that we used to in the cars,
Yes.
that's actually designed to store it for a lot longer.
And start.
And
that's it.
start and that's it. Yeah, yeah. While the lithium, the so-called traction batteries, they can keep the charge for a lot longer.
Yes, and they're designed to be discharged and recharged and discharged.
Yeah, yeah, all right.
Whereas a calcium starting battery, it's called a starting battery deliberately, is designed to live at a high end of float. 12.42 volts is flat on a calcium battery. They live between 12.42 and 12.85. These batteries live between 12.85 and 13.15. Yeah, that's their life.
Yep. Is there anything in the technology that's going to, for the traction side of things, like what I've got, is there a better technology out in the...
Yeah, we're playing around a lot with lithium ion sulfur and lithium air, but unfortunately it comes back to what is the safest for Joe public to access, and lithium iron phosphate is still the safest. Yeah. Sorry, Mick.
That's okay. About 7 years ago there was talk of an ultra capacitor lead acid where you can throw in...
Felt it, touched it, used it, tested it. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, CSIRO developed it with Excite Technologies at the time, or GNB. It's now been sold to a Japanese company and it's being built by East Penn Manufacturing in Pennsylvania in the United States. Very expensive. It has additional pure carbon grids following the negatives, so that's an interesting combination. And then there's another version that has a super cap. Remember I gave a prezzo on super cap? It has a super cap built in as well. So there's Axion Power make one, and East Penn. But East Penn have decided that it's proving not to be suitable for starting, but it's very suitable for cycling. I better wrap. Any other questions? Last one? No? Good, done. Thank you. Thanks.